Great. Well, welcome everyone to this Facebook Live. It's my first, so a little bit nervous, but a very happy Easter to you all. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Claire Dalpra. I've been involved in researching evangelism, mission, the planting of fresh expressions of church for over 20 years now. Where am I today? I'm in Sheffield, in South Yorkshire in England. I live on the east side of the city, for those of you who know Sheffield, and out of my kitchen window I have a lovely view of the Peak District. I live with my husband and a 15-year-old daughter. Who or what is Church Army? Well, not to be confused with Salvation Army or Jesus Army. Church Army has existed for about 150 years. We're a mission community training and deploying licensed lay evangelists in the Anglican denomination across the UK and in the Republic of Ireland. So we do evangelism as well as advocating, resourcing and enabling evangelism more widely. If any of you are tuning in from Australia, New Zealand, the States, Canada, Africa, Jamaica, Barbados, Church Army exists there too, so do look them up if you get the chance. So what is Church Army's research unit? Well, about 25 years ago, our team was created to research what was happening in mission, predominantly across these islands, and with a focus on, again, predominantly our own Anglican denomination. But sometimes we do research work with other mainline denominations as well. We lead on our own research and review projects, but we also take on pieces of externally commissioned research work. So what do I want to talk to you about in the next half an hour? Well, I want to introduce you to my contribution to this latest book, Messy Discipleship, hot off the press, in which I write about a previous piece of research that our team did called Playfully Serious, which I think some of you have heard about. It looks like that. Hopefully that rings a bell. This research we completed in 2019, but me writing not only about what we found, but about the research process in this book has only just come out. So that's previous research. But I also want to tell you about our upcoming research, and the two do follow on from one another, about to be launched, called Deepening Discipleship, that Lucy and I have been working on with some amazing Messy Church leaders from Bristol, Hereford and Durham Diocese. We've been working away at this for the last 18 months, so I'll say a bit more about that at the end. So, as is your custom, I will light a candle. And pray that, Father, would you draw close to us in this time that we have right now and inspire us by your Holy Spirit. Amen. So if you have something to hand that you can write with and write on, that would work well. I have 4 things I want to focus on this morning. So if you have a piece of paper we grabbed from the printer tray or a journal that you do your reflection in, open it up, and I invite you to divide that piece of paper into 4 sections. It could be squares, or it could be rows, or it could be sort of diagonal, like whatever takes your fancy. 4 sections of roughly equal space, and then in each quadrant I'd like to invite you to doodle the following symbols in the corner of each space. So in the first quadrant, I'd love you to doodle this capital D just in the corner, leaving some white space to write more in a bit. And then in the second quadrant, I'd love you to doodle a little candle symbol in the corner. And then in the third, these get a bit harder, a circle with a cross on top in the corner. And then in the fourth, now this one needs to be a bit bigger, it needs to sort of take up the whole space, and you have a choice, either a thought bubble or a speech bubble. And here's how you decide which you do. If you know you're better at talking and need more time often to listen and think about things, I invite you to draw the thought bubble. But if you're good at thinking and reflecting, and you know what you need to work on is to externalise your thoughts with others, with your co-leaders, the rest of your team, then draw a speech bubble. And if you can't decide, then do half and half. This, of course, is all a cunning ploy to convince you that research isn't as dull and as boring as sometimes it can sound. Although this next bit, as I sort of introduce you to playfully serious, might sound a bit researchy. So in Messy Discipleship, I introduced to you what playfully serious is. We began this research in 2017. It was funded and commissioned by the Church of England, so that was our denominational focus. We were asked by them to look at, firstly, what's happening in terms of discipleship in Messy Church, and then secondly, how are Messy churches developing as church. It was a mixed methods project, which basically means it involved different types of research. So we did some telephone survey work with leaders of 174 Messy churches in England. We did some focus group interviews, again with Messy church leaders. We did some research using creative methods with adult, teen and child attenders of Messy church. And then lastly, we did a very modest amount of telephone interview work with parents of families who had left Messy church. And at this point, I just want to say a huge thank you to all my team who helped make Playfully Serious happen. And a big thank you too to everyone who took part. And if you're watching today and you took part in any of those aspects of Playfully Serious, do say hi in the chat. And yeah, let me again say thank you. All the research findings for Playfully Serious can be found on our website, which is www.churcharmy.org under the tab Research Unit. So this is the summary booklet, and we have lots of accompanying papers for the different aspects of the research. And in my chapters of Messy Discipleship, I introduce those different parts of the research. So the first quadrant, the space where you've doodled a capital D. What does D stand for? Well, you guessed it, discipleship. What else? So you can doodle an equal sign and write discipleship. In my first chapter, which I have called A Researcher's Journey, because not only do I begin to introduce what we found, I also talk about the process, what it felt like. In this first chapter, if there was one thing I would draw out from it this morning to say to you, it's don't be afraid of this word discipleship. In the circles I move in, it's getting used a lot, and in the context of measurement impact for growth, which sometimes can just heighten the sense of panic around the word. In this chapter, this first chapter, I outline the process of defining discipleship, in order for us to measure it. And I conclude on pages 19 and 22. At times, I felt I was trying to measure something immeasurable. I believe discipleship should remain something of a mystery. The fact that something so life-giving was a difficult concept to measure reminded me of the observation that some things are bigger and more mysterious than we can humanly pin down. These indefinable concepts such as love and community can't be contrived or controlled. All that you can do is create environments in which they are more likely to thrive. So once I realised that there wasn't one kind of easy way to define and measure discipleship, I then found it easier to think, well, if there's something about discipleship that is a bit of a mystery with lots of different elements to draw out, and one of the research papers on our website, I attempted to do that, draw out some of those elements. But if this mystery, this discipleship is a lot about what we do, but also that funny mix of what only God can do, I then paradoxically found it more freeing to say, well, what I can do is offer one way to begin to unpack that mystery with families. I used felt and talked about discipleship as following Jesus for the whole of your life. But I've met others of you who have tried other equally effective ways. A backpack with props, a treasure map, something in nature. So just as I'm talking, in your D quadrant, I kind of invite you this morning to think, how would I explain discipleship to my families? What way would energise me that speaks of my experience? If one of my parents or teenagers or children in Messy Church came to me tomorrow and asked, what does it mean to follow Jesus? What does this word discipleship mean? Where would you start? What analogies would you use? What kind of symbols, imagery? Some of you might be thinking, I'd prefer to have someone else's answer so I don't get it wrong. I understand where you're coming from. But I would say whether you use someone else's material or not, whatever you say, learn it off by heart. Make it your own. Because when you say something off by heart, it comes from the heart. So I'm just going to pause a moment and give you a chance to write something down, maybe a word, a doodle. It doesn't have to be fully formed, it might just be a glimpse of an idea. If you're really stuck, don't panic. Our upcoming research has a resource that might help you. So my second symbol, the candle, that is to do with my second chapter in Messy Discipleship. My second chapter is called An Attender's Journey. And here I outline some reflections on the research that we did with adult, teen and child attenders. And if there's one thing I want to pull out of this chapter, it's that while some have wondered whether Messy Church is like the shallow end of the swimming pool in terms of spirituality, our research found, of course, that the lives of the people coming to Messy Church aren't shallow. On page 38, I write, to listen to them talk, issues such as grieving the death of a loved one and mental health all surfaced fairly swiftly, even in short interviews. So in the space on your piece of paper with the candle symbol on it, I invite you to put an equal sign and next to the candle put some wording of your choosing. Maybe it's going deeper or listening to them talk or what's going on in people's lives, whichever term you prefer. And just have a think this morning, how can you and your team encourage those deeper conversations? How do you create room to invite your families to share as they wish, and no pressure, but as they wish? Where and how do we create the pastoral space for them to do that? And I chose a candle to symbolise this issue because someone wise once heard them say, you don't find lit candles in chaotic or frenetic households or spaces. You find them in spaces where someone is trying to pay attention. And again, if you just don't know where to start, hang on to the end. We have some ideas for you. My third chapter looks at the journey of leadership, and I hope the statistics we uncovered about how many of you lead as volunteers in your spare time celebrate your generosity, your initiative, your determination, your commitment. And chapter 4 explores further two categories of messy church we looked at in our research. Messy churches that are outreach initiatives and messy churches that are fresh expressions of church. That is their own congregation where the majority of families won't find their way to Sunday anytime soon. And as leaders of the messy church, you are in effect leaders of a planted congregation. I write that it's sometimes tricky to tell at first glance which is an outreach messy church and which is a fresh expression of church, messy church. And on page 52, I write, some might ask, why does it matter whether a messy church is deemed a fresh expression of church or an outreach initiative? The most important reason these categories matter is to do with who takes primary responsibility for the discipleship of families that attend. If a messy church is an outreach initiative, a stepping stone to belonging to other aspects of church life, then discipleship is a wider issue across the parish. Messy church is just their way in. But if a messy church intends to be a fresh expression of church, if this is church for these families, they will not get such things anywhere else, and all the issues are intensified. If these dynamics are not working in the messy church, there is no wider parish or Sunday safety net to fall back on. So for those of you who are leading a fresh expression of church, messy church, I don't know whether seeing your role as an informal church or congregational planter liberates you or terrifies you. But if there was one thing I would say to you as leaders is take on the wisdom of church planting in the last 20 years and plan for who in 5 years and who in 10 years will take on the leadership of your messy church in your place. Pray for the next leaders to emerge. Invite them to lead with you. Train them up as apprentices for such a time as you feel it's right for you to step back from leadership. And why do I say this? Well, we had too many stories in the research of messy churches that closed when the founding leader couldn't lead anymore. So it just simply stopped. In my denomination, historically paid leadership posts have processes that automatically see those leadership roles filled. But anything that's not historical or formal, like those who lead planted fresh expressions of church and those who lead messy churches, they don't have those processes to fall back on. We must take the initiative ourselves. So next to this symbol of church, I invite you to write church. And for leaders of messy churches that are outreach initiatives, and sometimes that just works really well. It's a fantastic way in for families to become part of the wider parish. Thank you for all you do in mission. you may want to sort of doodle stepping stones or a bridge from your messy church to church, or maybe your messy church is within the circle, however you wish to visualise it. In this third quadrant, in this third space, just write down, is there anyone God might be calling you to pray for, train up, take on as a new leader? And if there is no one, and I know sometimes there just feels like there is no one to even help, let alone lead, just write a prayer that God will send someone. So the last quadrant, the speech or the thought bubble, depending on which you doodled. In this fourth space, I want to talk about our upcoming research. So just to recap, Messy Discipleship talks about Playfully Serious, that was research we completed in 2019. It's just that this book is newly published that tells the story of that. Our upcoming research, which for short is called Deepening Discipleship, and last week in last week's Facebook Live, Kathy, David and Jonathan in Hereford mentioned this. Huge thanks to them and everyone else who took part in Deepening Discipleship. Do post in the chat if you're watching, do say hi. You'll hear a lot about this research in the coming months, I'm sure. The findings PDF is called A Voyage of Discovery, Deepening Discipleship in Messy Church and Beyond. And huge thanks to our amazing designer who's put this PDF together. It's an online PDF, but you can easily print it off, as you can see I have done. A bit of colour, but lots of white space, bullet points, action points, case studies, pop-up quotes. Very practical resource for you all to get your hands on. So as I say, you'll hear lots about this research in the coming months, but from a research perspective, I would say to you this morning, this is a relatively new kind of research. It's called participatory action research, and that means that the messy church leaders themselves in Hereford, Durham and Bristol Diocese have done the on-the-ground research, piloting 6 approaches to deepening discipleship. And then we, and by we I mean myself, Lucy, colleagues Naomi and Lou, came in from outside, forced you to fill in numerous reflection forms. I think you were glad to see the end of those reflection forms. But those reflection forms then enabled us to come together twice to discern the data and action any change as a result of that discerning. So that's where you get the action research. And the participatory element was because we did it all together. So why the speech or the thought bubble? Well, this research has needed teams to reflect together on the following question. Where is God at work in our messy church? And that's the question, if you've got space to put in your bubble, or if not, just below. But that's the question you'll be hearing more about in the months to come. All the 6 approaches that we piloted will give you more space to have those deeper spiritual conversations that we were talking about when we were talking about the candle. Messy basics, messy extra, social action will give you space to talk more with your families about deeper issues. And then maturing teams, peer mentoring and young leaders are the approaches that will give you space to talk to your teams about deeper issues. I wonder which of the 6 approaches you and your team will feel most drawn to. Whichever approach you try, it's reflecting together as a team and indeed teams across different Messy churches on this question that will be key. This question, where is God at work in the approach we're trying? So the findings will be available next week on www.messychurch.org.uk/deepening-discipleship. I think Jane's popping that in the chat for you. There you'll find the findings booklet and a suite of resources that can help you, including one that will help you explain and explore discipleship. And then on our website, www.churcharmy.org, if you look under the Research Unit tab, again you'll find the findings and more about the approach we used, this participatory action research. So all are available next week, beginning the 12th of April. I'll end with this. Sometimes when you start talking about research, you can just see people shut down all the sort of stereotypes or assumptions that research is sort of dry and academic and dull. You can see it in people's eyes when you start talking. But to those folk, I would say this, that research is about listening. And someone wise once said, when you truly listen to someone, and that person knows they've been truly listened to, that for them is like a prayer. So thank you for listening to me today. I hope the ideas you've noted down will lead to life-giving conversations with your teams over the months to come, and all the best in all your Messy Church endeavours, as I say, in the weeks and months and years to come. Thanks so much.